I didn't hear about the grand opening from my son. I heard about it because I asked. We were on the phone talking about something ordinary. Weather, staffing issues, how busy the city had been lately. I mentioned I'd been looking at flights for the ribbon cutting. There was a pause long enough to feel deliberate. And then my daughter-in-law said, lightly, almost helpfully, "Oh, that was 10 weeks ago. We only invited close family and friends." Close family and friends. I remember repeating the phrase in my head after we hung up, trying to understand which category I had slipped out of. I had wired $520,000 over the course of 8 months to get that hotel off the ground, not as a loan shark, not as a controlling investor, just a father who believed in his son's ambition. The agreement was formal because my accountant insisted. Staged funding, equity percentage, financial transparency. I had signed it all, a little embarrassed by the paperwork between us. But I never imagined I would need it. For a few days, I told myself the omission had been an oversight. Weddings are chaotic, restaurants overbook, invitations get lost. Maybe this was like that. Maybe they assumed I didn't like crowds. Maybe they thought I was busy. My son didn't call to explain. He didn't send pictures either. The second call came 4 days later. This time her tone was different, tight, brisk. "The bill is overdue. Have you sent the money yet?" No preface. No mention of the opening I'd missed. Just the assumption that the final installment would move on schedule. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I'll need the updated financials first," I said. Silence. "They're coming," she replied after a moment. "They were supposed to come 2 weeks ago." I kept my voice even. I have spent 30 years in commercial real estate. Emotion is expensive. Paper is not. When I invested, I had insisted on staged releases. The final $120,000 was contingent on documented expenses, equity filings, and a review of outstanding liabilities. My son had laughed at the time, said, "Dad, you don't trust me?" I had told him trust and documentation weren't enemies. Now they weren't either. The meeting happened the following Monday in the hotel's small conference room. It was the first time I walked through the lobby. Polished marble. Custom lighting. A wall of framed photographs from opening night. In every photo, my son stood grinning with a champagne flute, his wife beside him, her parents in the front row. Friends from college, investors from the city council. There was no empty space where I might have been, no absence to notice. I felt something then, not rage, just a quiet recalibration. They had invited an accountant to the meeting. Young, careful, polite. He slid spreadsheets across the table and began explaining cost overruns. Imported fixtures that exceeded budget. A delayed permit that had triggered penalty fees. "Why wasn't this disclosed?" I asked. My son shifted in his chair. "We were going to tell you." "When?" Another silence. The overdue bill they had called about wasn't small. It was attached to a vendor threatening legal action if payment wasn't made within 30 days. If the supplier pulled out, the hotel's restaurant would shut down. I let the accountant finish. I asked for clarification on the equity structure. There had been adjustments, temporary, I was told, to accommodate emergency financing. Adjustments I had not approved. When he finished, I folded my hands. "Based on the contract," I said, "I'm suspending the final disbursement until an independent audit is completed. I'll be appointing the auditor." My son stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. "You're pulling the money?" he asked. "I'm protecting my investment." His wife's composure thinned first. "Without that transfer, we're exposed." "You were exposed before I walked into this room?" The words came out calmer than I felt. No one raised their voice. No one accused anyone of betrayal. The authority in the room wasn't emotional. It was contractual. The document we had all signed sat between us like an impartial witness. I wasn't punishing them. I was enforcing terms. The audit began 2 weeks later. It was clinical, methodical. No scandal, no fraud. Just mismanagement. Optimism untethered from discipline. Loans layered over projections that assumed immediate occupancy rates the market couldn't support. The vendor was paid from existing operating funds after spending was cut elsewhere. The restaurant stayed open. Staff hours were trimmed. Expansion plans were shelved. My final installment remained untouched. Communication shifted after that. Emails instead of calls. Quarterly reports delivered on time. Questions answered before being asked. My son grew quieter around me. Not hostile, guarded. Something unspoken sat between us at family dinners. He had expected unquestioned backing. I had expected inclusion. Neither of us said it aloud. Months later, I received the first quarterly statement showing a modest profit. Leaner operations, controlled expenses, sustainable projections. I transferred the remaining funds the following morning, exactly as outlined in the agreement. No commentary, no announcement. He called that evening. "Thank you," he said. I waited, wondering if anything else would follow. An acknowledgement of the opening, an apology, an explanation. Nothing came. After we hung up, I walked out onto my porch and sat for a long time. I understood something I hadn't wanted to before. I had confused access with belonging. They hadn't excluded me from the opening because they hated me. They excluded me because they didn't see me as part of their emotional circle anymore. I was infrastructure, stability, backup. And maybe that had been my own doing. Years of solving problems quietly, writing checks instead of asking questions. The hotel will likely survive now. It might even thrive. Our relationship will too, in its new shape. Polite, structured, less porous. I didn't celebrate when the profit statement came. There was no victory in it, just steadiness. I still love my son. That didn't change. What changed was the illusion that love alone secures a place at the table. Sometimes it only secures the bill.